Great, thank you so much. I know that I'm the last presentation you're going to see today, and you're probably exhausted at this point of the day, but I need to ask you to stay awake with me. I'm here to help you guys understand a lot of great information. I'm here to help you, but you can also help me. We can help each other understand what we can do to improve communication and maximize your contribution to the workplace and your work environment. So I am not here to preach at you. I want you to think with me. You're spending 40 hours every week, day in and day out, in the workplace. You probably spend more time with your peers at work than you do your own wives or husbands or children. Can you imagine that? You're at work all day, you get home, maybe 6 o'clock, you're rushing to get dinner ready, make sure the kids get bathed and fed and in bed, and then you wake up and you have to do it again. And you look at your peers for 8 hours a day, your coworkers, and so your workplace environment, communication, and collaboration there is a very important part of your daily life, your mental and your physical and your spiritual life. So I just wanted to have a discussion with you, and so that when you go back to your workplace, you can take these skills with you and have this knowledge to help you maximize your productivity at work. Both actually within your professional and your personal lives. That everything will go smoothly until you retire, and then you'll be sitting on the beach with a martini with the waves at your feet. You agree? Who's going to retire? Who wants to retire at some point? Who wants to retire? Do you want to spend the next 30 years at work struggling with communication, struggling with collaboration? I don't think so. So the things I'm going to present today are going to help you to improve communication and collaboration and make your life happier. So again, let me tell you a little bit about my background. I have worked within the HR field in employee relations, making sure that everybody was happy and satisfied with their work, with their jobs. I did that for a couple years, and then I worked in the customer relations area, working with customers and their dissatisfaction or satisfaction. And I realized that that wasn't really my forte. So I completely shifted gears and started in finance. And now I work in fiscal policy. With government appropriations and appropriations law in that area. I got that. I hope the interpreter got that word. That's my passion. That's where I work. I want to make sure that the money the government is using is well spent. So I've been in that field for a while now, and I think the budget I'm responsible for is about $14 billion. And you may wonder, wow, $14 billion, how is that possible? But I'll tell you, remember, it's all related to fuel. And so America, what makes us run, everybody here needs fuel for all sorts of reasons. So that's why I work with such a large budget. And there's, I'm sure you can imagine, so much communication that happens all over the place, day in and day out in my office and in my field. In 5 years, we've had turnover where I've had 5 different bosses come and go. And it's not because they get overwhelmed, it's just the way that in the stressful environment that we work in, that's what happens. And I've seen a lot of the turnover, and I think that, you know, I've seen some people that after their first week or two on the job, some of you might feel the same way, feel burnt out already, but welcome to the government. It's the same kind of thing. After the first couple weeks of trainings and orientations and getting situated, it really all relies on communication. And I've noticed, I think John Mitchner, who spoke earlier, a lot of you had a lot of questions asking him about things related to communication. I think my presentation will go into some more detail, and we'll tap into some of that regarding things that, you know, I would have done, should have done, could have done, but let's talk about what you can do. Here, today, going forward, what can you do to improve communication? So that's some of the things that we'll talk about. Who's going to work my slides? Oh, I guess that's me. Okay, so you may be wondering, what do I mean by a high-performance team? I'm referencing a team that is successful at providing results and meeting management expectations, basically. I could go into more detail. I know everybody has their own definition as to what that means, but a high-performance team is a successful team, and they're able to do that by constantly feeding the spirit and the climate and collaborating and communicating and working with everybody in their office. And that's a key. Communicating that information definitely requires collaboration and the information sharing. So we're going to talk about those two, and I'll expand upon both. They both will involve certain strategies in how to help you communicate with your colleagues. Some of you out here, I'm wondering, how many of you have somebody in your workplace that you look at and you think, God, I wish they would just fire that guy? I'm sure that there are, and we don't need to name names, but I'm sure that, I mean, this is the real world. There have to be, you're going to work with a variety of people and different personalities. I have a lot of colleagues that know a couple of signs, and they'll look at me and they do this sign, which is calm down, calm down. The reason why they know that is because I get really active and I'll be emailing and communicating, and they know me. That's my personality. It's not, they just know that that's who I am as a person. It has nothing to do with my deafness, has nothing to do with any of that. But I'm very alert with what's going on in the office, especially because of we work with fuels. Some of the coworkers in my office are older women close to retirement, and I need them. I need the knowledge, the information that they have, and I have to work with them to get all of that. And how do I do that? You've got these older women who have been there for a long time, and we just come from very different places and different backgrounds, but you have to find a way to identify strengths and weaknesses and effective ways to communicate, and that will help me succeed at what I need to do. So you have to understand your colleagues, what each of their strengths and weaknesses are. We each have them. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses. And it's important to be aware of that, but also to be aware of those of others. Boy, I'm really getting into the weeds here. So when I say communication, I'm not necessarily talking about your personal conversations with your peers or with your supervisors. I'm talking about professional communication. A lot of our professional communication happens in email and so forth, but the important components for communicating on a team involve sharing information or sharing knowledge. There's a lot of sharing that happens because you obtain information and then you need to share it with your colleagues or share it to management. The management level gets your information and they share it up above. It works up and down the ladder in the career, in the professional world. So these are basic three basic circumstances that occur when communication happens. You share information, you receive communication, you receive information, and then you respond. It takes you time to analyze why you're receiving it, how that impacts your work. You have to understand why certain pieces of communication are being communicated to you in order to respond. And then, of course, when you receive information, the third bullet up here is responding to that information. And then as a deaf employee, you may wonder, you have to analyze, how am I going to do this effectively? How can I respond and communicate? And we'll go into some more detail. But the bottom line, again, is we're talking about how to communicate. The third bullet there with responding has a lot to do with keeping communication lines open. It's open-ended communication. Always keep the communication lines open. If somebody emails you and there's an issue, you may have an answer, but you don't just answer and walk away and that's the end of it. You answer and then you follow up and make sure, was I clear? Or do you need any help? Are there any more questions? Reach out and let them know I'm here to support you, so that they know that the communication lines remain open. And if you don't create that environment, that you may find that, and this is true for whether you're deaf or hearing, but you may feel, they may not feel they can ask for clarification or ask you for more information, and vice versa. If you feel like you don't have that option because somebody seems to have closed down the communication lines, just ask. It's better to ask than it is to sit there and make assumptions. I'm sure you all understand these. Some of these are very basic, but I've caught myself forgetting some of these basic rules of communication. Sometimes there will be a situation that's so complicated, and to to get all of the details and explain it all to your supervisor or your manager. Sometimes you have to go up above his or her head, and to give them the full story or all the details, they may get lost. You need to be very simple, very direct, very concise. What is the situation? Like that, you know, the who, what, where, when, why. Give the very basic facts. The same thing applies when you're speaking to, you learn this in elementary school, and it applies when speaking to supervisors or managers. And I promise, if you use those, the who, what, where, when, why, to guide your communication and the information that you share, and you do that for the rest of your life in your workplace, if you create that habit, it will just help communication flow so much more smoothly. Sometimes you may know some of them, but not know the where. And if you don't bother to find that information and you share what you've got with your colleagues or your supervisors, that's incomplete information. And how do they feel receiving that? They may feel, you know, that you didn't do your job to get all of the information. And they need all of that. They need the full picture. Sometimes maybe you just don't have the time or the patience to get that information, but it's important for clear communication to be direct, honest, and concise. Conversations are two-directional as well. They go both ways. Sometimes you might have a colleague that has a very strong personality, and you're trying to get a word in, and maybe if you're deaf and you're working with an interpreter, the interpreter lets you know that they're trying to get your words in, but they can't because this person is just very vocal and they're very well respected. They know their stuff, and sometimes you want to interrupt, you want to get a piece in, and you value their information for sure, but they don't realize, you know, if you haven't been able to get your comments in, and sometimes once you do, they realize after the fact, oh, you know, I'm sorry that you weren't able to get that in earlier. And a lot of the people that we work with, you know that we're in Washington, D.C., you would think that everybody knows deaf people and has worked with deaf people or has met a deaf person, but I'll tell you, it's not necessarily true. There was a gentleman that worked at the Pentagon, a very high-level person in the Pentagon, and we crossed each other's paths, and he looked at me and he asked, "Can you drive?" And I thought, you got to be kidding me. This is a brilliant man. You write important responses to people for energy solutions, and you're asking me if I can drive? And it just occurred to me that not everybody is exposed to the deaf culture and the deaf community. And I know a lot of you in your workplaces, you may take that for granted. You think that everybody does, but you have to take the initiative to teach people to communicate with you, to maybe gesture with them. The hearing world, you know, they use the tone of voice to communicate, and you know, you communicate using sign language and gesturing, and exposing them to that will help them understand how to communicate better with you. That's all there is to it. You don't have to overthink it. Once you can establish the communication, the work that needs to be done will happen so much more smoothly. With the communication struggles, you have to just continue to communicate for the sake of your success. So when you receive communication or you're sharing communication, the world spins really fast, 24 miles per hour, 24,000 miles per hour. You can't just give a little tidbit of information. Management doesn't have time to do the work that you need to do. Or if you give them too much information and it's inconsistent, they don't have time to break it apart and get to the details that they need. It's a group. The bottom line is it's a group effort, and if you don't contribute and you're not constant in the work that you do, the consistency, the work falls apart. Some people will think, oh, well, that's not my job. That's the other guy's job. That's his job, or that's her job. And that happens on teams. And sometimes, like this, for example, this morning, I wanted to be here with you all day. I wanted to be here this morning, but I had to go to the office this morning and do some work. And I really was frustrated because I wanted to be here to share, to participate in the information sharing. But I went to my office this morning and was told that a colleague of mine, her mother had just passed away. And so I needed to be there to help participate and to oversee a forum, to take her place and to moderate this forum. because she couldn't be there. And it was an important role. It was an important job that I needed to do. That was just this morning. And she had reports that were due. And I could have hemmed and hawed and said I had other things to do, that I wasn't going to be able to help out, but I didn't. Those who know me know that once I take on a task, I'm going to jump in full speed ahead. And that's the way that I am. I mean, this report that was due should have been done last week. And so I dove in and I did the work, and I understand. I mean, somebody has a family member that passes away. That's not something you can plan for. Things happen. So always be prepared to support your coworkers, your team, that by doing so you'll get respect your way. You will have more respect for the work that they do, and that fosters that collaboration.
All right, so management. Now, you may have goals and you have different ways of achieving those goals, and management may see you trying to achieve those goals, and they want to see you as a team player. So they want to see you in line with the goals of the team. And you may have all these skills and all these experiences, but you're not maximizing them if you're not participating in the group with their goals. If you're only thinking about yourself, who is really benefiting? You need to know how to help your other colleagues to get the information they need and share it so that you can work towards the collective group's goals. And if you do that, you'll be more recognized as somebody who is a collaborative member of the team. You're more likely, in fact, to get recognized as a good team player than you are as an individual. The more you distance yourself from the group, the less likely that is to happen. And with technology changing, you're doing a lot of changes to new systems and new protocol, and things are changing constantly and very quickly. And the way that you keep up with it is through communication. And I put on here, it says paddling, no paddling, that comment. What I mean by that is if you don't have an answer or you don't know the answer, be honest about that. Make that up front. Make that known up front, instead of saying, oh yeah, it's probably this, or adding a bunch of fluff. If you're honest about it, and if you're not honest about it, misunderstandings can happen. And that's not going to benefit the managers or the team. Just give the information you do know and then be honest with what you don't. You may notice that your bosses or supervisors may, when they write you emails, do they write you big, long emails? Typically they don't. Why does it take so? The reason is because it takes so long. They'll be brief and to the point and concise. That's how they communicate. There's really no point in dragging out an email in long depth to their subordinates. It's much more clear if you're concise. So make your emails clear and simple. You don't need to add a bunch of fluffy language to make it look fancy, because you're leaving people looking for your point. If you make it right away and quickly and simply, they can get on with it and move on with their work. Now, if you change your thinking and how you communicate with your colleagues, and it doesn't matter who the colleague is. Like I was saying, I work 40 hours a week, and I see my colleagues 40 hours a week. That's, for the next 20 to 25 years, you can figure out how to work with them and don't spend that time being cold to them. Spend that time getting to know them. If all you ever say is hi for 40 years, for 40 hours a week for many, many years, all you ever say is hi, how are you going to make a connection with them? Everybody is different. Everybody should be respecting each other as colleagues and getting to know each other. And that's not how you teach someone to work with you. Go up to them, be assertive, tell them who you are, get to know them. And it's very important that you be proactive in this and initiate that conversation. So when we're talking about removing disability and just communicating, when you're explaining something, you can agree and say, yeah, you're right. If you communicate and contribute, you'll feel more as part of the team. But if you keep quiet and allow yourself to be isolated, who's going to turn to you and who's going to make anything happen for the team? It's all on you. If you remain quiet and fall by the wayside, you won't be part of the team. You need to be more assertive. And if you have ideas or you have opinions, make them known. Share them with your team. Communicate them to your team. Share the information you have. And be honest, too. An open, honest communication amongst the team is going to increase the quality of work that you produce. And then you'll get more recognition, and that will move your whole career in the right direction. You'll grow, and you'll have more career opportunities as a result. And then creativity. If you get an assignment and you work very hard on it and you send it to your boss, or maybe you work with a coworker and you need their support, or you need someone to look over your work after you've done it to kind of review it, because 2 heads are better than 1. That's a really great idea. You can get more creativity by using 2 people. Teammates or having even just a partner work with you is going to help you have new, fresh ideas and have more creativity. And that's going to require communication, because that will help you satisfy any new requirements that might be set in the future, too. So collaboration is a really important part of creativity and communication, too. All right, so this is a little bit repetitive, but I wanted to touch on it again. Basically, management, so you may remember that the government used to give out lots of money for free, and no longer is that true. They want a return on their investment. The government has spent money to make change, and now they're being held accountable for that money they've spent. So a lot of audits have occurred, and a lot of different agencies have gone through that process, and it's going to get worse. They're going to be more closely watched. So you need to be aware of that and make sure that you're satisfying budget limitations. So ROI. If you are not returning on the investment to the group, you're not collaborating, you're not communicating, you're not working together, you won't achieve success. If you do, you will. That's how you arrive at a successful place, because you're part of a larger system, and you're part of a team that's working within another team. And if you don't get your work done, then how can another part of the team get their work done? How can they perform at a high level? Collaboration is going to impact several different levels of a team, and you can't have teamwork or collaboration without communication. A high-performing team without good communication. Again, attitude is really important. You probably have heard this over and over again, and you may say that some people have bad attitudes and they'll never change. But really? Are you going to say that until the day you retire? You can't just continue to complain your entire life, like John was saying. You need to find a way to work it out. And don't bother EEO either with your complaints, because EEO is for very serious complaints that only occur once in a rare occasion. If it's something that your manager did, if you file an EEO against your management, then all the other managers will hear about it, and they perhaps will have a stigma against you because you filed kind of a frivolous complaint. Managers are there to get the work done. They may make mistakes, and if it obviously was an intentional discrimination or a mistake that was really egregious, then you can file an EEO complaint. But don't just run to EEO every time you're upset with your management, because it's really for more serious complaints. So I'm sure you all have stories, but I want to tell you one of mine. So there was this one day I was at work, and somebody emailed me, and it was a red flag. And you get those emails that say emergency, red flag, or something really serious. I didn't know who it was from, but I opened the email, and I started to read through it, and it had probably 15 people CC'd on it. And I was like 15 people were on the to line, and then 25 more people were on the CC line. And it was to someone outside of the agency I was working for. Those people in Europe, in Italy, and people from all over the world were CC'd on this email. And it was this explanation of this horrible situation that had happened, and it was very serious. And in the very last sentence, almost from at the very end of the email, at the very last sentence, it said, "We're going to have to call John Slone and from DLA I would, but he's deaf. I can't, how can I contact him? And you know what I did in response to that email? I was really tempted to say, you know, I wanted to yell at him in front of all those people, but I knew better. I didn't do that. I said, he's obviously all upset about something. So I read through the email. I kind of got the information I needed to understand the situation. And then I found a really easy solution. What I ended up doing was I called him through VRS, my video relay service, through an interpreter. And I told the interpreter, gave him some vocabulary and explained what was going to happen in the call. And then I called this woman, and you know how people answer phone, they're like, oh, hi. And I said, oh, hi, I'm John, John Slone. And that situation you just explained in email, all you need to do are these 4 things, and then you'll be done. It'll be really simple. And she said, oh, thank you so much. She was so grateful. But I hadn't really mentioned the email and that she said she couldn't call me because I was deaf. So we ended the call, I hung up, and then you know what I did next? I typed an email response directly to her, the woman that had kind of freaked out, and I said, oh, you know, that was just me who called you. You and I just spoke on the phone, and I hope that you understood everything. I'm a colleague of yours in the workplace, and I represent other people you work with, so please don't use this approach again. This isn't the most effective way to respect me as a colleague. I said it in a nice way, in a respectful way to her to give her some feedback, because we're all people after all. And so I sent that email, and she responded back saying, oh, I'm so sorry. That wasn't my intention. And guess what I did? I deleted it. I deleted it, and it felt really good. I taught her a lesson nicely, and she had said she's sorry, and that's what I wanted. That's all I needed. Work went on, and my life went on, and it's not, you know, with time you need to help people kind of educate them. And it's not because I'm deaf, it's just because she hadn't done her homework and she didn't know what to do to get the work done. And maybe she was a little bit half-assed with how she had done it, and so she tried to throw it all on me. But there's a solution to these kinds of situations. So no to takedowns. I have that written up here. This is a problem a lot of people face. Let's say somebody were to email something and say, it's going to take too much time for this. Oh, the interpreter's on their way, so I have to wait for the interpreter to come. Oh, sorry. It's going to be a couple business days because I have to make sure I can work out an interpreter. Using excuses instead of communicating ahead of time and making sure to have arranged the interpreter already. But, you know, people will look at that as something as an excuse, as something that you're using instead of doing your work. Because maybe what you really are is tired, or you had problems at home with your kids, or there's other reasons you don't want to do that work at that moment. Make sure you use those as moments, as teachable moments, and explain why that's not a good, you know, excuse to use. 99% of the time, it's not reasonable to have an excuse. So it's your job to educate people in those moments where you see that type of behavior happening. And it's not complicated. In the workplace, you should be focused on providing results, getting the work done, getting the manager's goals accomplished. And that should be your prerogative. The time that you spend in the workplace is up to you to find out how to maximize. If you've maximized your time, then when you get home, your home life can become more relaxed because you don't have the stresses of work constantly on your mind at home. Communication in the workplace can give you something to look forward to. In retirement, you won't have to look back at all of the struggles or all of the suffering you went through. Did I cover everything on this slide? Okay. So, is everybody good? I thought we were on the last page because the screen went black, but no. So, you have to find a way without complaining to become a good employee by sharing with your colleagues, communicating with them. And you need to respect each other as equals. The best way to do that is through communication. Sometimes you may think that if a colleague tells you, oh, we'll just talk about this later, and if you have the information now, or if there's information lacking that you need, make sure that you ask them and do something about it so that doesn't happen again. Because if you allow it to happen too many times, it will become a bad habit. So if somebody didn't give information to you that you needed, let them know. Tell them I need that, and I need it on time. Because, like I said, if you allow it to happen too many times, it's going to become a habit. And then people will understand your expectations, your needs, and your communication style. And I often remind people to communicate me even about little things. I'm sure you all have heard this before. Just be assertive to go up to people when you need something immediately. Don't wait for them to ask you if you want something. Go up to them, be proactive. If someone were to come up to me, you can't say that they don't come to me because it's... If you just use the excuse that they don't come to you, why should I go to them? You take the first step. You do it first.
So you can find effective ways to communicate, make improvements in the workplace, and to improve collaboration. And that will help you advance in your career as long as you have the right attitude. And remember, everybody's human. We are all human. It doesn't matter if you are black, white, deaf, hearing. It really doesn't matter. We're all human. And we all pretty much think the same way. A lot of the things that I'm thinking are the same thing that your coworker is thinking. At certain points of the day, yes, there are certain times of the day that are busier, but you know, we all at lunchtime, we're hungry. We all go to cafeteria. And at this point of the day, you guys are probably thinking about happy hour. Who's thinking about happy hour? We're all thinking a lot of the same things. So it's important to keep that in mind. At work, that you have the responsibility to communicate with other people and to help enforce that collaboration, and that will help you be successful. I think that's about all I have. I hope that I've shared some good ideas. Should I go ahead and take questions, or do we have time for questions?
I'll interpret, so if you want to just stand back there.
Go ahead. Yep,
I'll
repeat your question.
So the first rule, if a boss threatens an employee, like I've told you 10 times to do this, or I've told you 10 times not to do this, don't let your boss get to that point of saying, I've told you 10 times. If you tell your boss,
your boss has no business threatening you, basically. They shouldn't come to you and say that, you know, I've already told you to do this 10 times, period. I understand what you're saying after many, many years that you've seen a lot, I'm sure.
If the interpreter isn't doing well, if I have to repeat myself several times, they're not delivering the information to people. That means so I have to tell the boss that my interpreter is not doing well, and I need to get the correct interpreter for me. I can use that information to communicate with my boss.
So basically, his comment is regarding not having a qualified interpreter, and I understand that. It happens. It happens sometimes. But your colleagues need to know this. They need to agree with you. They should be aware of this. There was one time I was in a pretty large meeting, and some situation happened, and I got a last-minute interpreter replacement. And I hadn't had a chance to get to know this person or work with this person, but we had to proceed with the meeting. And, you know, sometimes you just don't have the energy to put into the prep and getting to know somebody, and it really wasn't an emergency. It was a pretty high-priority meeting. So we get into the meeting, and the interpreter was voicing, and I couldn't tell that the interpreter wasn't understanding me until one of my colleagues corrected the interpreter and said, no, I think what he means is this and this and this. So I wasn't aware until the colleagues pointed it out. So if your colleagues even come to you and say, you know what, I don't know if that interpreter understood, that's great. But how did that situation even happen in the first place? I mean, if this person, if they valued me as a colleague and as a peer, and you know, they feel it's important that I should know about something, you are a value to your team. You need to show them that you're a valuable team member. And if you have an interpreter that maybe isn't qualified, your team should also protect you and advocate for you and express that, you know, maybe that interpreter is not the most qualified person, because they can also pick up on when the interpreter is not understanding the meeting proceedings. Your colleagues should already, my point is that they should already know who you are and the value that you add to the team. And so if an interpreter comes and makes mistakes or isn't clear, they already know this, that it's not you, that it's the interpreter in that situation. When I first joined the government, I didn't understand how to establish the relationship with these other offices. And I didn't have an interpreter, but I went ahead anyway. I didn't let the fact that I didn't have an interpreter stop me. I shared the information. I found other ways to communicate that until we were able to get an interpreter. But they again will understand. Another question?
Last question.
Oh, last question. I got time for one more question. Going once, going twice. Here we go in the front.
So you work in accounting, and sometimes you probably go to meetings and share ideas and bring them back to your workplace. But what if you get into the weeds of the work and you forget the ideas, or you forget to try to do something to improve your communication? Because you get so caught in the flow of work. How do you stop that?
Sometimes you can get lost in the shuffle of work, and 1 year, if you let it go on, 1 year becomes 2 years, becomes 4 years, becomes 10. So the next time this happens, if you know your work and you know that you might forget this or that, make a note. Put a reminder into your phone, into your calendar. If you know that you've got this habit of kind of procrastinating and ignoring this, I mean, you have to change that yourself. You have to the bottom line is you have to do it. You have to make it happen. You can't make the excuses that, oh, I don't have enough time, I've got too much going on. You can't do that. You just have to focus and do it. And then you'll realize, like, gosh, I shouldn't have procrastinated. I should have just taken care of this a long time ago. I'm sure a lot of you feel that way, that you just need to make a note of it. You just need to track it, put it on your calendar, or set a reminder. Oftentimes, there's a lot of information going on in meetings, and I try to catch what I can and make notes of what I can. Afterwards, I will contact certain people to follow up and say, in the meeting, is this what we discussed? I want to make sure that this is the takeaway, and that this is what we plan to do, or that kind of thing. Don't just make assumptions and think you understand what's going on. That's dangerous. That's very dangerous. Making assumptions and then leads you to making errors down the road, and then you'll realize when it's too late that you misunderstood the communication. And you know yourself. You know how to communicate. You know your pitfalls. Try to avoid those. Don't be reactive. Be proactive. Don't deal with things after they happen, because it's not going to help. There's no time to really fix something. And I think it's time for me to stop